Talk. I'm Chris Cowden. I'm the Director of Women in Their Work. Welcome. Christie's traveled all the way from Lubbock. She teaches at Texas Tech, and she's agreed to chat with us a bit and talk to us about the thinking behind her work, what went into the making of it, and she also will respond to questions. So we'd like you to save that up and ply her with thoughtful remarks. And also I'd like to ask you guys to mark your calendars for April 14th, we're having a big party, the benefit bash. It's at Karen and Rick Hawkins, so we're handing out those flyers at the front, so get one and please try to join us. It's April 14th on Saturday night. So anyway, join me in welcoming Christie Blizard.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and yes, feel free to ask me questions. So I especially love the question and answer period. So the kind of general idea behind the show is around the notion of, or the question of how can we live in two worlds at once, because that's something that I've kind of always felt as a person and have been trying to represent in different form. And so I took this opportunity in this show as a way to kind of really separate the gallery in half and represent in this space kind of the quotidian or the everyday, and in this space a kind of dream or an infinite realm or a kind of otherworldliness that I've always felt attached to. The basic composition of this show happened pretty intuitively. I was like looking at the floor plan, and I was sitting in my apartment, and I was trying to get an estimate of how big the space was, and I'm like, it's about twice my living room. And I was like, well, this could be interesting to actually kind of live in the space and a lot of my work deals with blurring the boundaries of the private and the public, and other projects I've done where I give work away or I post billboards or kind of put things in public places. And so I took this up as an opportunity to continue that line of thought. And as I started to work on that kind of general idea of that kind of dichotomy between kind of the present tense and the kind of other world, I started to really think about the painting The Flagellation of Christ by Piero della Francesca, which when I was in graduate school I wrote a pretty good sized research paper on that painting, and I was just really amazed about how much was in a single painting. And so in the Flagellation of Christ, which was painted around 1455, there were two main scenes within that composition. There was present-day Florence, and then there was kind of the mythological Christ scene. And there was a kind of three figures in the present-day Florence, and one of the figures, art historians had really tried to figure out who this person was, because he wasn't like one of the commissioned people, and he had a foot kind of in both realms, and so he was this kind of seer, this kind of go-between between the actual everyday life and this kind of other place. And so that really started to get me thinking about how I could start to flesh the show out. Another kind of reoccurring theme within this show is how light works, and I found that as a connection to the Flagellation of Christ as well, where there's kind of light switches that don't work. In this room we have glow tape where they actually kind of emanate the light, and then kind of like artificial light LEDs that can become more metaphysical or spiritual. The title of the show, when I was 16, I saw the White Buffalo, is based on a high school field trip that I took when I was 16, from Indiana to Janesville, Wisconsin, to see Miracle the White Buffalo, who was born in 1994. And I didn't really understand the kind of gravity of that experience at the time, but looking back, it was a really pivotal experience. And that was around the time in my life when I knew I wanted to be an artist, and that became kind of a metaphor for experiencing something that was both kind of in everyday life, but also something that was really sacred. So in this space, I literally reconfigured my living room. It's almost exactly a mirror image. It's weird now when I live in my living room because nothing's there, but I have been living in this space and sleeping here. And so this is pretty much exactly how it was before I came here, and I have a silly little rule with all my shows that I have to fit everything in my car. So everything fits in my car. But I was talking with the art historian who's going to be my essay writer for the brochure, and she had a really interesting insight that everything that was a vinyl print was energy coming in from the outside. So it's kind of like reinforcing that idea of like living in your head. So all the influence that could be coming from the outside is kind of fake. And she also made an interesting tie to the painting by Magritte, The Human Condition, where there's a painting on an easel of like the space behind the easel, that painting where it's like a painting of the landscape and so it's kind of like, well, what's real? But it's all fake because it's all a painting, but at the same time it's all real. So this obviously is not my living room, but it's as real as my living room. So it's, underneath all the show, it's kind of like, well, what's real anyway? It's like everything's real, but it's all kind of fake or language-based in a sense. So that takes us then to this room, which is literally kind of like a dreamscape. I really wanted to sleep in this space to kind of create a more in-depth dreamscape. And there's a huge banner printed that's of a Google Earth screenshot of where I grew up in Indiana, and I have recurring dreams that take place in that place of that river. If you want to come and look at this very briefly. But this space is really like the kind of place that's under like our conscious thought, or at least the place for me that I wanted to try to represent that I've never been able to like fully represent before. And so this large banner is a panoramic, like I said, of a river, the river where I grew up, where I have recurring dreams, and the video itself is influenced by early video games such as Pong and Space Invaders. And I wanted to echo in the quality some of the iconography that was happening in the video. And so it isn't necessarily like a dream or the like images from my recurring dream, but it's meant to be kind of some of the lighter stages of sleep before you actually have a narrative start to form. So it's really just kind of like this soup of information before it starts to form a language. So it's, kind of maybe like just an energy where, it's like chaos and then order. So it's how order kind of comes out of chaos. So, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So if there are any questions, let me know.
Laura, I have a question.
Yeah?
So all of this is hand-drawn?
Yeah, this is all drawn as a stop motion, just very basic stop motion through a program called After Effects. So it's digitally drawn, but it's with a tablet. And it's kind of onion skinned. So yeah, everything you see is like very manually moved. There's no computer really aided anything except for the onions. The onion skin just kind of separates it so you can see how it's moving. But it's basically like a stop motion. And I can layer images and, but yeah. So this just kind of happened over the course of about 2 months. The animation was starting to grow. And I just, just kind of let it, whatever came to my mind, I would draw it and just let it move back and forth.
But it doesn't follow the same pattern?
Yeah. So I took this Google image, like screenshot of this Google Earth of the river where I grew up, and I just basically cut that out, and then when I did the animation, I followed along how the river curves. And the glow tape really just kind of echoes a lot of, like I said, the imagery within the animation.
In your animation, why is the river flowing from both directions?
I wanted it to be, I think the river was kind of where I started with the space, but I wanted it to be more of kind of maybe a more open-ended symbol that could just be like information moving back and forth without a kind of concrete logic. Like, so it was maybe like the space before a narrative happens, because I wasn't really interested in forming in a narrative. I really just wanted it to be like pure sensation. That's a good question. So it was just a decision that I made along the way to make it less linear. So yeah, there's 2 animations in this space. A lot of my work, I talked with like a freelance writer this morning about my work, and he had a really interesting insight that like almost all my work is based off of failures, which is totally true, and that's something that I really like embrace. because I think it's true to like the process of when you make something. Like you never know like what you think is going to work, how that works, and so like this piece, for example, this circular piece. I started it in 2010, and it originally was stop motion, so all this paint was a part of an animation. And then this head was made from a latex mask that I actually had to go to the emergency room for because I was exposed to ammonia. And so I just couldn't give up on this piece because I had gone through so much with it. And so it was like hanging in my living room forever. And I'm like, I'm not going to give up on this piece. And so I made this animation, and it was the last piece I made for the show. This was filmed from the city where I grew up in Columbus, Indiana, and I found it on YouTube. But the guy in the video is like screaming, and so when I turn the audio on, it sounds like he's roaring because I've slowed the audio down. And so I just like shot my projector over to this piece, and I projected it onto the lion head, and so I figured it found its match. So
It was on YouTube, and it was your city, and your town is tiny, right?
yeah, it's not very big.
30. What's the guy doing?
He's like screaming. He's like falling out of the car. Yeah.
Deal with the keyboard.
The keyboards. Well, I'm studying classical piano, so I tried to learn that. This was a piece I made, I think in 2010, and I left Lubbock for the summer, and I stored this upstairs where I live, and it got rained on, and I was so mad because it took me a long time to make it, and I was like, hey, I really like that piece. And like my roof had flooded, and there was this huge flood, and I was like, oh no. And that's why it's buckling. And then I like put it in a closet, and I was like, I'm not gonna throw it away. And I pulled it out like a couple months later, and I plugged it in, and I'm like, it works. So again, it's like kind of like it rose from almost being in the dumpster. But I didn't know that it was gonna blink in this kind of random pattern, and it made it's based off of a light bright. A lot of my work is kind of like childhood toys, like lightsabers meets light brights, and so. It was just kind of like a handmade light bright from trash, So any other questions or anything?
Bed it's kind of like a puddle of water, like a river.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Like the vinyl?
Yeah.
This is actually like a giant photograph of that place that I cut out. And I actually sleep on the floor like this, so it's not like, so I do sleep out like this. So it's really just kind of, how it is. Those are like failed paintings that just weren't going to happen, so I cut them up and I sewed them into strips, and then I liked them, so it's like something has to happen to them to get them to work. And behind you were like color strips of, those are spectrogram designs based on living room sounds that I convert into color patterns. Based on the shape of the sound wave, and so those are kind of, it's really just 3 seconds of living room sound converted into those patterns. Any other questions?
I do have questions. Different questions. Did you rent that? And
I did rent the billboard for the show, for the title.
did it stay up for a while?
Yeah, it was up through the month of January in Lubbock. People didn't like it. At least one person didn't like it. I get to drive by it every
Is that
day.
a church?
A church behind it?
Is that in front of a church that built it?
No, it's in front of like a Miller Lite, facility. So it's a real beer facility. I don't really control where they put it. I just say, whatever's free, whatever's open.
I think you did a good job with that window. From a distance, I thought it might be a real window outside. Yeah. Not a question, just a comment.
Yeah.
Is
Is that based on a window?
This is where I live. So these are actually that's the fireplace in my apartment, and that's the window, and that's like the horrible little wallpaper design they have in like at the top of the building. Yeah. So those are things that I couldn't take with me.
That's in your house.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.